Today I'm going to tell you about flowers. A flower, sometimes known as a bloom or blossom, is the reproductive structure found in flowering plants. Plants of the division Magnoliophyta, also called angiosperms. The essential parts of a flower can be considered in two parts: the vegetative part, consisting of petals and associated structures in the perianth, and the reproductive or sexual parts. A stereotypical flower consists of four kinds of structures attached to the tip of a short stalk. Calyx, the outermost whorl, consisting of units called sepals. These are typically green and enclose the rest of the flower in the bud stage. However, they can be absent or prominent and petal-like in some species. Corolla, the next whorl toward the apex, composed of units called petals, which are typically thin, soft, and colored to attract animals that help the process of pollination. Andreosia, from Greek andrios, oikia, man's house, the next whorl, sometimes multiplied into several whorls, consisting of units called stamens. Stamens consist of two parts: a stalk called filament, topped by an anther where pollen is produced by meiosis and eventually dispersed. Gynoecium, from Greek gynaikos, oikia, women's house, the innermost whorl of a flower, consisting of one or more units called carpels. The carpel, or multiple fused carpels, form a hollow structure called an ovary, which produces ovules internally. Ovules are megasprangia, and they in turn produce megaspores by meiosis, which develop into female gametophytes. These give rise to egg cells. The gynoecium of a flower is also described using an alternative terminology wherein the structure of one sees in the innermost whorl consisting of an ovary, style, and stigma is called a pistil. A pistil may consist of a single carpel or a number of carpels fused together. The sticky tip of the pistil, the stigma, is the receptor of pollen. The supportive stalk, the style, becomes the pathway for pollen tubes to grow from pollen grains adherent to the stigma. The relationship to the gynoecium on the receptacle is described as hypogynous. Beneath a superior ovary, perigynous, surrounding a superior ovary, or epigynous, above inferior ovary. The primary purpose of a flower is reproduction. Since the flowers are the productive organs of plant, they mediate the joining of the sperm contained within pollen to the ovules contained in the ovary. Pollination is the movement of pollen from the anthers to the stigma. The joining of the sperm to the ovules is called fertilization. Normally, pollen is moved from one plant to another, but many plants are able to self-pollinate. The fertilized ovules produce seeds that are the next generation. Sexual reproduction produces genetically unique offspring, allowing for adaptation. Flowers have specific designs, which encourages the transfer of pollen from one plant to another of the same species. Many plants are dependent upon external factors for pollination, including wind and animals. and especially insects. Even large animals such as birds, bats, and pygmy possums can be employed. The period of time during which this process can take place, the flower is fully expanded and functional. It's called anthesis. The study of pollination by insects is called anthecology. Honeybees are very important pollinators. Most of the time, both honeybees and the plants they visit are benefited. The honeybee gets some food and the plant gets pollinated. When a honeybee is collecting pollen from the anthers, male reproductive part of a flower, it puts the pollen in special pollen baskets on its hind legs. All that pollen will be taken back to the hive for the bees' use. The honeybee is a messy gatherer of food, and some pollen gets stuck on the hairs of its body. When the bee visits the next flower, some of that pollen brushes off onto the flower and it sticks to the stigma, female reproductive part of the flower. Pollination will take place. The bee does not make any effort to put the pollen in the right place. Plants cannot move from one location to another. Thus, many flowers have evolved to attract animals to transfer pollen between individuals in dispersed population. Flowers that are insect pollinated are called entomophilous, literally insect loving in Greek. They can be highly modified along with the pollinating insects by coevolution. Flowers commonly have glands called nectaries on various parts that attract animals looking for nutritious nectar. Birds and bees have color vision, enabling them to seek out colorful flowers. Some flowers have patterns called nectar guides that show pollinators where to look for nectar. They may be visible only under ultraviolet light, which is visible to bees and some other insects. Flowers also attract pollinators by scent, and some of those scents are pleasant to our sense of smell. Not all flowers or scents are appealing to humans. A number of flowers are pollinated by insects that are attracted to rotten flesh and have flowers that smell like dead animals, often called carrion flowers, including Rafflesia, the Titan arum, and the North American pawpaw. Flowers pollinated by night visitors, including bats and moths, are likely to concentrate on scent to attract pollinators, and most such flowers are white. Other flowers use mimicry to attract pollinators. Some species of orchid, for example, produce flowers resembling female bees in color, shape, and scent. Male bees move from one such flower to another in search of a mate. Many flowering plants reflect as much light as possible within the range of visible wavelengths of the pollinator the plant intends to attract. Flowers that reflect the full range of visible light are generally perceived as white by a human observer. An important feature of white flowers is that they reflect equally across the visible spectrum. While many flowering plants use white to attract pollinators, the use of color is also widespread, even within the same species. Color allows a flowering plant to be more specific about the pollinator it seeks to attract. The color model used by human color reproduction technology relies on the modulation of pigments that divide the spectrum into broad areas of absorption. Flowering plants, by contrast, are able to shift the transition point wavelength between absorption and reflection. Many flowers have important symbolic meanings. In Western culture, the practice of assigning meanings to flowers is known as florography. Some of the more common examples include red roses are given as a symbol of love, beauty, and passion. Poppies are a symbol of consolation in time of death. In the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, red poppies are worn to commemorate soldiers who have died in times of war. Arises lily are used in burials as a symbol referring to resurrection for life. It is also associated with stars, sun, and its petals, blooming, shining. Daisies are a symbol of innocence. Lavender is a flowering plant popular in gardening, fragrance, and cooking. You can't go wrong with a lavender plant. In addition to its versatility, lavender is easy to grow, requiring very little water and full sun. Angelica, also known as wild celery, is a genus of about 60 species of tall, biennial, and perennial herbs in the family Apiaceae, which flower are commonly found in tea and herbal remedies. The stem of the angelica can even be made into candy. With over 50 species, the angelica is also good for bees and other pollinators. Known for their large starburst flowers, it comes in white or green. Flowers began changing the way the world looked almost as soon as they appeared on Earth about 130 million years ago. During the Cretaceous period, that's relatively recent in geologic time. If all Earth's history were compressed into an hour, flowering plants would exist for only the last 90 seconds. But once they took firm root about 100 million years ago, they swiftly diversified in an explosion of varieties that established most of the flowering plant families of the modern world. Thanks for watching this Adventurous Kids episode. Yeah, doggy!